Okay, guys, welcome to another episode of Tell Skel. Today we've got a friend, a pastor, Drew Miller. How are you doing today, boss?
I'm doing well. Jordan. Excited to be here.
Good, man. Good. A bit of a background about how we met, I guess. Just real short and simple. We met in a coffee shop in town, right?
Yeah.
We just got chatting and we become friends ever since, right?
Yeah, your accent stands out in Southern Georgia a little bit, and so it was an interesting start. Yeah.
Yeah, I imagine obviously when you hear as a pastor, obviously part of your job is to obviously spread the word of God. And when you hear a person sometimes talking about God, which you just so happen to were that day, and you hear a different tongue, being English, it obviously perks you up a little bit. So
That's right.
just to give a bit of a background of where you come from, Drew, just to kind of break the ice in our conversation here. So where were you brought up?
Yeah, so I was raised just outside of Charleston, South Carolina, on a tree farm on Johns Island. So Johns Island is an island about half an hour south of Charleston proper. And so I grew up there on a stretch of land. My family's been in the same place for 200 years.
Oh, wow.
The same land for 200 years. And so I grew up next to my grandparents and aunts and uncles and cousins and 10 houses in a row that were all relatives. And so
wow.
Yeah,
That's so crazy.
Yeah. Holidays were nuts.
Yeah. So you're basically saying your next door neighbor, the neighbor after that, the neighbor after that, all family members.
All family. Yeah.
Wow. 200 years on that land. There must be some stories around that place, right?
There are a lot. Yeah. A lot of stories. It's a place that's just kind of worked into my bones. You know, I guess really probably literally, in that we've eaten what grew there and drank the water from the soil there. And so that place is really very much who I am, who we are.
Yeah, place in your heart. Absolutely. And it's funny you should say that, Drew, because this year, obviously, I'm living in Statesboro, Georgia with the team that I'm on here. And I'm in a spot where I chose to live on a farm. Where I'm staying, my actual house is on a farm road, and this is the first time ever in my life where the landlord of my property, like, you know, me and my roommate, we're growing food that we're eating, and it's the first time in my entire life that's kind of the self-sufficient, and it's crazy. It's crazy. I mean, obviously, you saying you're used to it with your family, like actually planting the food, growing the food, and eating it is a dynamic that I never, ever in a million years would have been normal for me, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
Charleston, I mean, South Carolina, it's a place that you're saying you grew up in.
Yep.
I don't know what's happening there. My Siri just popped up. But where did you where did you find yourself, finding what you're doing now? Did that start off as, we haven't obviously touched on that yet. You're a pastor here in Statesboro, Georgia. Where did that kind of start for you?
Yeah, that's a great question. I was raised in the church. We were raised in two different. Actually, my dad was Roman Catholic and my mother was Anglican or Episcopal, and so we went every other Sunday to every other church, kind of bounced
right back. You took turns.
Yeah, we did. Which, as a pastor, I don't know if I could recommend that. It seems like a bad idea, but it worked. It was great, you know. I always, God and faith were always kind of around life. It became very real to me in middle school. So I was at a retreat, like a camp, a weekend camp up in the mountains with a bunch of other students, and they were talking about the idea of the love of God, and particularly revealed in Jesus, and what that might mean for us. And that was the first time that it hit home with me. And so really from middle school through, I've been trying to walk with God and walking with God. But it was in high school that I first got the sense that I was supposed to do some kind of professional Christianity, be a minister.
Right. Yeah.
I thought I'd do youth work for a while. That was where I was going to start, is work with youth, teenagers. But then I started doing music, and I thought maybe I'd do music for churches, like kind of singer-songwriter, acoustic guitar, modern worship stuff.
Yeah.
And then in college, I kind of had this this voice of God moment, which I don't have many of, but had just a very clear direct sense of no, you're supposed to pastor, you're supposed to preach, you're supposed to lead a congregation. That's what you're called to do, which is very rare and surprising. I mean, it was so surprising in its clarity and in its force that day that I laughed, like when it struck me. It was like just like totally out of the blue. And but in hindsight, it's like, yeah, everything is lined up for that. So yeah, so really, I guess since college is when I thought I'd do this. But then I had this massive crisis of faith towards the end of college. I moved back to Charleston and worked for a church for a while, kind of worked through some healing with that, and then found some resolution, ended up going to school for ministry, and then got called here. So the bishop and the little church that was here asked me to come and lead.
And so that's where you find yourself in little old Statesboro in Georgia, eh?
Yeah, here we are.
I know. And I mean, it's funny, Drew, that you talk about that because, you know, a few episodes ago, I had a friend and a teammate, Curtis Thorne, on, and he talked about how, you know, his big part of his thing is trusting the process and things falling into place. Yeah. And it was funny how you were talking there about, like, you know, you just kind of trusting things falling into place.
Yeah.
And almost like just trusting where in your life and in my life, because obviously, listen, there's going to be people that are listening to this that have zero faith.
Yeah, totally.
There's going to be people that are listening that have maybe a different type of faith. And that was why I was really excited to have you on here, because I think certain conversations people kind of shroud away from in that uncomfortable conversation. And I love those conversations.
Yeah, you do.
I think exactly, you know, because we've had them before.
Yeah.
I love conversations that are a little bit uncomfortable, that can challenge the way you think or see things, because you don't know a different way until you know a different way.
That's
and
right.
Until someone kind of, you know, questions the way you look at things, you'll never know differently. So that leads me to a point with you, Drew. Like, you know, how did you ever kind of find confidence in your faith, I guess? Because, you know, you find your faith by your parents or your guardians kind of bringing you up. But I feel like, speaking for myself, you hit a point in life where you're like, you kind of decide for yourself. So where did you kind of find that confidence in your faith to where you were like, yeah, this works for me? Yeah,
good question. And I love what you said about like having the hard questions and getting into the hard conversations, because it's just where you grow. You know, that's where growth is. I tell that when my folks are reading the Bible and we hit stuff that's like really uncomfortable, because the Bible is, let's face it, there's a lot of uncomfortable stuff in there, you know?
Right.
And, you know, that's very often folks will read it and be like, you know, this is uncomfortable, and so I'm going to dismiss it. This can't be God because it's uncomfortable. But it's very possible that you're actually going to learn more and come closer to God when you deal with things that you're not comfortable with, because it's where God might be not you, you know, might be revealing himself in a way that's different than the way you would expect. But anyway, that's totally aside. How did it become real to me? So, I mean, in middle school, that was the moment that really was like a turn, light bulb. This is real. And it was a really compelling presentation of the concept of salvation as Christians understand it, that God has extended his love to people who've rejected him, and that love transforms us and transforms our relationship with him. And it was just an overwhelming sense of certainty and of peace. I mean, I cried for a long time. That's basically what it looked like, you know, to the point that the people in my group that went with me thought something was wrong. Like, are you okay? Like,
something underneath it. Yeah.
I'm just this is just true and good. But the thing is, though, is that it wasn't just a once and done thing either. Like, it wasn't something that I could just
put on one moment.
Yeah, and be over, and it'd be over. Like it didn't work that way. I had a lot of seasons where it became less real, or where it didn't seem true, or and I still do. I mean, I still have patches in life, days where I think, am I really doing this? You know, like, is this
Right.
It's absolutely, can I be absolutely certain? And of course I can't. Like, you're not certain about anything important in life.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
but I'm more sure about this. The further along I go, the more sure I become, because like you said, like trusting the process, you start to see things kind of fall into place as you trust and as you walk, and you think maybe this process, there is purpose behind it. Maybe there is
Right.
a hand orchestrating, or a will that's behind it for good.
And that gives you a bit of confidence and a bit more buy-in, doesn't it? Because I feel like you hit those adversaries and it's kind of like, with that little bit of what you just touched on there, the bigger picture, it helps give you strength to drive through them.
Yeah, that's absolutely right, Jordan. And I think for me, not only just like the last thing you got through, but the whole history of your life beforehand, like looking back at that, there's a story in the Bible, in the Hebrew Bible, the Old Testament, where God's people get rescued from Egypt and they're being brought into the place God has for them. But as they do, they have to cross a river. And when they cross the river, God makes them collect stones out of the bottom of it and make a big pile of stones on the other side of the river. And they call it an Ebenezer. And what it is it's a symbol so that when Israel gets to where they're supposed to be, they can look back and say, yes, God did bring us here. And they don't forget.
Nice.
Like, okay. It's a symbol. So I do that. I have I don't have a pile of rocks, though I have friends who've done that. I have a stack of flashcards, because frankly, I'll wake up in the middle of the night and think, like, did I make this up? Question every presupposition, every instinct. Like, do I just feel this way because I was raised this way? Do I, was it just, did I have an experience of God simply because I, had a glass of wine before I went to sleep and suddenly, I have these dreams, what's going on? And so I have this list of flashcards of moments that are in my mind, probably God, and hard to write off otherwise. And so when I hit a hard spell, I go back and I think, like, okay, like, this really did happen. Like, this moment really happened. This sign, this God answering prayer, this miracle, this feeling, this experience, like, these were real. And so even if it doesn't feel real now, I actually have to trust my history, right, and history with God for the sake of the present.
Because your brain will try and trick you.
Oh, on everything.
Your brain will try and tell you, you're seeing it this way because you want to see it this way. Like, and that's where it's almost nice hearing you say that, because I'm going to give that a go. I know if there's one thing I'm going to take out of this chat with me and you now, is that when we end this and we post it, and hopefully, it's going to get millions of views, that I'm going to take away, I'm going to start just having a little few flashcards or a little notebook where I'll jot down things that I think is a sign of God. And again, I know this is going to be for some people like, oh, X off, get rid. But yeah, sure. It's more so like, just again, I could have easily got another footballer on here with you instead of yourself. I could have easily got another coach or another thing. And part of this podcast journey that I want to go on is to have conversations like yourself, because this little spark of something that could lead to something good for me or life change for me, I've got. So sorry to interrupt you and take you down a different channel there, Drew, but I think it's awesome that you said that, because your brain can really, really easily trick you to think completely irrationally.
Yeah. And especially right now, I mean, we live in this post-enlightenment culture right now where we think about everything as worthy of doubt and skepticism. Like, we don't trust any authority figure. We don't trust government. Do you trust? I don't.
Right.
Do we trust the media? No. Do we trust our professors? Maybe, but it depends on where you went to school and where you're raised, how much you trust
right.
them in what way. Like, you trust science, sort of, but right now we have data on both sides of everything we're talking about. It's like we're in this frame, a way in which we view the world in which everything should be doubted. Nothing is trustworthy. And so in one sense, it means that all of life is based on faith now, that everybody has to admit that everything you do, no matter whether you believe in God or not, is
Right.
built on faith, which it is. And if anyone wants to talk on that one, I'm all about it. That's a fascinating
That's a strong topic, eh?
It is. But even beyond that, like, it means that we all doubt ourselves constantly, and we doubt the relationships that we're in, and we doubt our jobs, and we doubt our sense of calling or of purpose. Like, we doubt everything all the time. That's not just religious people. Everybody is always doubting.
And that's another thing, Drew. What leads me into something with this is because it doesn't matter if you're a pastor, if you work in Walmart, if you're an athlete, if you're a professor. As you said, I don't know why it keeps doing this, but my Siri keeps popping up. There is going to be doubt. And let me challenge you. How do you deal with that doubt?
Yeah.
Like, what is there a process that you always rely on? Is there a one specific method?
Glass of wine helps, really does. For me, if I'm thinking about doubt in the religious frame, and doubt, which is where it's most kind of oppressing to me, where it's most forceful and disconcerting. The first thing that I do is I try to well, it depends on how bad it is. Sometimes it sets in kind of as a almost panic attack level. Like, right. And a lot of us, panic attacks isn't something we talked about very much growing up. We didn't have a word for it, most people, but a lot of folks experience that. And if that happens to me, like if I have this kind of overwhelming sense of doubt or despair, then I'd go outside. I go for a walk. I go to the coffee shop where we met, Three Tree, and talk to people. I know now at this point, and it's taken me years to learn this, but I know that the way to get out of being stuck in my head isn't to try to work my way out of it. That if I'm stuck in my head, using my head is not the way out. That's the problem. And so saying, okay, step out of that, go outside, think about something else, talk to someone else, be reminded that you're not the center of the universe, Drew, that you have, there are people in that moment to realize that, like, the most concerning thing in my life, in my heart, should not be and is not, Drew, do you have this all figured out? But is, how do I love this person in front of me? That's actually more important than me having this figured out.
Right.
And so being out in public snaps me out. So that's one thing I do. I get outside. Another thing that I do is I just take the long game. I take the long vision and say, like, okay, I'm feeling this way now. I wasn't feeling this way yesterday, and I probably won't feel this way tomorrow. So to act on this now would be foolish.
Right.
I feel this way. I need to remind myself of what has been, where I've been. Taking the long vision, pulling back a little bit from the moment. And then I guess third, I talk to community. I talk to people who I know who I know love me, and who I know love God, and whose faith I admire and trust.
Because as you said earlier, there's not many people that we can nowadays. So having those people to lean on are massive, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I do have a few, and there's a few. I've got one buddy in Charleston, and we talk every few months. We don't talk very regularly, every few months, but as an old friend. And he and I have very similar, like, pits of doubt, like the low points in our lives. Like when we go there, we go in a very similar way to a similar place. And so when we are in the darkness, we can
relate to each other. Yeah,
and just be like, oh, yep, I've been there. I'm not there right now, but I was there. I feel you.
Yeah.
And that gets me out of myself. Like, oh, woe is me, the world is ending. Like, no, it's not.
But again, the thing is, Drew, and I know we've even talked about this, because I think it's really funny how the center of we all think we're the center of the universe.
Mm-hmm.
Like we all do. And I didn't really relate to that until a couple of weeks ago when I heard someone talking about it, and I sat back and thought, like, it's funny because my minute problems feel like it is the balance of the entire world. And mine was something relating to soccer. And what you kind of mentioned there was how, you kind of talked about how when you're having a bit of doubt, or you're in a bit of a grout, whatever, going inside yourself to try and fix it and trying to dive deeper into that wound or that hole or whatever never really helps. Because again, you know, I know a lot of people talking about this monkey mind thing is the way it's being called at the minute, of this, like, you know, this inner self that just talks absolute nonsense to yourself. But you kind of touched on it there, going and speaking with other people and talking about them and helping others, and kind of, you know, like you talked about going to the coffee shop and just talking with, you know, your friends and your peers, and almost kind of forgetting about your problems and trying to help others solve theirs takes away the focus of yours.
Yeah, absolutely does. And I realized, like, as you were telling it, that, because that is right, that is what I said, I think that really does help a lot. The flip side of that is it is not any good to run away from your problems, right? Like, so all of my coping strategies that I talk about are like short-term, in the moment, but I also see a counselor, like every other week or so, and that I talk to regularly, and I process with him through a lot of this and say, like, how was this week? How do you respond to it? In the Christian tradition, we have something that's called spiritual direction, which is the idea of sitting down with like a Christian mentor to help you, not like a mentor usually helps you on like a particular thing of your life. Right. Like you might have a mentor for work, or a mentor for your family, or mentor, something that's like focused, and a spiritual director is like a mentor who's focused on helping you walk with God. Okay. And so they kind of help you develop the disciplines that are helpful, patterns of reading, praying, that kind of thing. I don't want people to think like, oh yeah, the way that you deal with your problems is you avoid them, you run away. Like, no.
Right. It's just the, like you said, the specific, as it's happening, you find yourself, hang on, this isn't working for me.
Yeah. And then I get help.
Right.
Help long term. Yeah.
And I think it's funny you speak about that long term. I think something that is, again, a bit of an awkward topic, and I feel like it's been brought up a lot more recently in the past. I talked about it in the last podcast with my coach, mental health. And, you know, like you talked about it a little bit earlier about the panic attacks, how, I don't know how many years ago, but mental health, if you were struggling mentally a few years ago, you might have been seen as just weak or soft. Yeah. Whereas nowadays, I feel like it's occurring with so many people, for whatever reason, that it is naturally getting spoken about more. And I mean, as a pastor, how do you deal with someone coming to you for support that's dealing with doubt or mental depression or?
Yeah, that's a great question. Well, I don't know about everybody else. I just pray and everything solves itself magically. Quote some Bible and then they're fine. No, that's not how it works. Well, actually, sometimes it is how it works, but that's not usually how it works. You know, it all just depends on the person. I mean, in my training in school, and actually for my network here, it's called a diocese, but this region of pastors that I'm in relationship with, our general recommendation is that if you can't resolve whatever the conflict is in 5 sessions or less, then it's probably not something that you're qualified to work with.
Sounds like a bit of a metric to go off.
Yeah, and it's not a hard and fast rule, but there are mental health professionals have a much higher level of training in understanding the human mind, and it's both its like cognitive patterns, but also the chemical processes that affect it than I do. So there are folks in my congregation who struggle with depression, and I have at different times, and I would be a fool to try to direct their medical, pattern, like what medicine they should take and where. I don't have any near the training that's qualified to that, but I believe it's good medicine. I mean, there's a strain of Christianity that thinks that still would hold that any kind of anxiety or mental health is weakness and is a problem of a lack of faith. If you just had more faith, it would be better. Right. That's just BS. I mean, that's just false. You've got throughout even throughout the New Testament, you have Paul recommending that people drink wine for their health. So there's which seems like a little thing, but what that shows us is that even those folks who are closest to Jesus and who are accredited with speaking what he would have them speak to the rest of the church, recognize that we're physical bodies that are affected by physical things. And that it is worth figuring out what those physical things are to improve the physical health of our bodies.
Right.
So that's helpful. So anyway, so there's a lot of, honestly, most caring for people with mental illness or with depression or anxiety is just listening.
Just being there.
Just being there. That's something, and it's not something you got to have a collar to do. Anybody does that. Just sitting and listening, asking how people are feeling. Sometimes, because I know how easy it is for us to get stuck in our heads, I will take people for walks. So I'll say, like, instead of having a meeting at the coffee shop or at the brewery, we'll just go for a walk. And that frees us to talk more deeply about things sometimes than you could otherwise. Takes the heat off the moment. You're not so focused on the conversation, but we're able to have it freely. So I also have 2 sisters.
2 sisters, you said?
I have 2 sisters and a brother. My 2 sisters are both counselors.
Okay.
So when I come
you could almost recommend them to.
I could. Well, they're not around here, so they're not any good.
Oh, okay.
But if I was to start giving bad advice, I would have 2 very firm voices to talk me down.
Yeah.
That is great. That's a great gift.
No, but it's funny you mentioned something that just kind of triggered a thought in my head there, Drew, about I was reading something the other day, and it was a quote that basically said, we were created to have 2 eyes, 2 ears, and 1 mouth to watch and to see and to listen twice as much as we speak. And that's something that kind of left a mark on me to think about, I am a person that I love to let my voice be heard. And I think something that is what I've come to understand recently is to make sure you also offer other people to be heard. And whether that be in your own relationship with, colleagues at work, just friends in your friendship group. And again, I guess it comes down to a little bit like we talked about earlier about being the center of the universe and knowing that your opinion always isn't the right one. It's just your general opinion.
That's right.
And I think for some people that are in a bit of a place where they're unsure if what their direction is or whatever that might be, someone that is just there to be heard can be huge for them. And I mean, that leads me to a question, Drew, of, I was listening to something recently with Matthew McConaughey, and he was talking about one thing that he looks at himself regularly is how he can be a better human being.
Mm-hmm.
And it's something that he challenges himself on. So how would you say you think you could be a better human being?
Oh, how, like me personally, or how would I encourage people to do it?
You personally. I've just sprung a question on you that you had no preparation for.
That's great.
How would you, right in this second, think, I could do this, or I could whatever, to be a better human?
Oh, that's a great question.
So let me give you a bit of answer to what Matthew McConaughey said. He said to question himself more. So
interesting.
There's Siri again. See, Siri's desperate to get involved in this conversation today.
You can understand. I mean, it's a very interesting conversation.
But Matthew McConaughey talked about questioning himself more. Yeah.
I do a pretty good job of that. I question just about everything all the time. That's probably not what I need. I think I would love to be, I think I would be a better human being if I often feel like I don't have enough joy. Like that my joy levels are low. And that part of that
take yourself a bit too serious, or?
Yes, I do. Like very much so. And so I think I would probably be a better human and like better for this world if I did take myself less seriously. If I Yeah, I mean, just for me right now to say my problem is that I don't have enough joy is like that's the problem, right? Like same thing. But
right.
yeah, I think that's probably the one, is because I'm always in questioning mode, always skeptical. I think I'd be a better human being if I relaxed more.
So then this is going to blow your mind, Drew. So then if I come up to you and said, I'm a person that I feel like, you know, I can be a better human being if I find more joy, what would be the first thing you'd say to him? Because I challenge you with this, I guess, arrangement of words or the questions, because it come around to me the other day. I was talking to somebody about how it's easy to give advice. There's Siri again. It's easy to give advice on problems that aren't your own because you see them very clearly for what they are. Mm-hmm. So for you saying, you know, I want to have more joy, the easy logical view would be, well, go and do things that give you joy more. Right? Yeah. But when we look at our problems internally within ourselves, as you talked about earlier, and going in to try and fix it, they're fogged with so much emotions. I mean, I don't need to dig into it. Yeah. But to see clearly on things, I think is something that I'm trying to strive towards and become better at. So that's why I challenged you with these two questions, to see how, you know, as a wise man that you are, how you would. That's a great question. So to go back to it, how would you tell me if I came to you with your problem as a person in your from your service and said, you know, I need to stop taking myself so seriously. I want to find more joy in my life. Yeah, I think that I would say there's a couple practical things that I would start asking about your community, and I would start saying, like, okay, who's your crew? Like, do you have good people around you? Do you have folks that are joyful or that are work around you? Because we're called to love people that are difficult to love. I believe that's one of the fundamental callings of the human being, is to love people who they don't want to love naturally. Right. But that also seems, at least in my experience, to be a reservoir that if I have supportive community around me, I'm better able to love the people that I don't want to love. You know, I think I have more joy coming from this community than outside of it. So it's a balance. Yeah. And in a lot of ways, a lot of what I would say would be summed up by just the phrase, and this is, you brought a pastor on, so here you go, is know Jesus, more. Because I really think that the depth, the greatest depth of joy comes from a sense of being deeply known and knowing that you're deeply known, and being deeply loved and knowing that you're deeply loved. That being known and loved and knowing that you are known and loved is the fountain of joy, because that's the place where you have peace, and that's the place where you have you can relax. You don't have to carry yourself because you have someone else who's carrying you. That's the essence. So things like a good community, the best kind of community, is the kind of community that shows you this love of God that is without question. That's the kind of community that I want you to have. And and there are disciplines in your life that help you see that too. So like regular Bible reading, specifically reading the Gospels, reading about the life of Jesus. The rest of it, we can get lost in a lot of different things. And I believe it's the Word of God, all of it. I believe that it's all there for our good. But I think it's most clear in the Gospels. That's where we see Jesus most clearly. And so spending lots of time there, to rest there, is a really good thing. Might tell you to get a dog. Dogs are really good for the same, to get you out of your head. I have been looking at a dog on Craigslist for the past few days, and I am this close
Getting it? So that, but what is it? I mean, the reason a dog and not a cat, the reason a dog is a good thing is because a dog in many ways exemplifies knowing and loving, right? That a dog is
right,
all up in your business and affectionate. And that's, it's limited.
just to feel loved.
Yeah. It's a gift. I think creation is actually supposed to do that for us. That's part of its gift, is that creation often gives us the sense of loving care when we look around. I mean, I'm looking out at the loblolly pine trees around me right now in the yard, and there's a joy in creation that I think comes from this same thought. Yeah.
The outdoors, being amongst it. Yeah.
Yeah. And honestly, a glass of wine is a good thing. Like I think that alcohol is a gift from God for joy. It can be taken too far. We've all seen it. We've seen it in our families, and when it does, it is ugly. It is ugly as sin, and it is just nasty. And there are many folks who should not approach alcohol with a 10-foot pole, and that is grace and wisdom for them. Like don't push your luck when you have those concerns. But I think in general, it's a gift. I mean, there's a reason that Jesus' first miracle, the first thing that he does in the Gospel of John, is he goes to a wedding where they've run out of wine, and he makes more. And he makes the best wine. And by the best wine in that time period, they meant strong wine, like the boozy stuff. That's what he made. There's a reason for that. Is because I think that God is concerned with our joy and with our life. So glass of wine never hurts. Sometimes hurts, but it's a good thing.
Well, I think it's great you touched on it there, Drew, because I think, again, it goes back to whatever you're in life. Joy is something that can easily get pushed to the side when you're striving for goals, when you're striving for where you want to be in life. You almost forget why you started doing it. And it's for someone like yourself, I know we've talked about it. You obviously want to build your service and make it bigger and make it better, and you continue to learn. And within that, you can get so piled down with striving towards it that you forget. I don't forget, but the joy gets suffocated by the striving, I guess, to do more, I guess.
Absolutely right. It does. Yeah.
And I sometimes think that for someone, let's speak for someone that has zero faith, that has come to your service for the first time, and they challenge you with saying, listen, I haven't had that blown away message from God. I've never felt that words of wisdom giving me a arrowhead to where I need to go. But I feel completely lost. How would you go around, helping that individual?
Ooh, great question. I mean, there are a lot of like Christian formulas for how to talk about, how to talk about faith and how to talk up to someone who doesn't have faith. But I really think that faith is not a one size fits all. That it takes that everyone is on their own journey, right? And so while I do have the explicit goal, I have a particular destination that I am aiming towards, and I have a particular goal of helping others walk towards it, because I think it is the true and the best and the most beautiful of the options. I think it's the right one, but I also know that I don't believe that that's something that I can force or coerce in any way helpfully. Like that if someone is going to follow God properly, they're going to follow God because they have found delight in who he is.
Absolutely.
And so if they're interested in exploring that, then I would invite them to do that with me. And so I'd be glad to, I love nothing more than reading the Bible with friends, like sitting down, reading it and saying, okay, what's God speaking to you here? What do you see? What does this mean for us and where we are and how we live and how we feel? I love that. And I think that's most often where, as we're seeking God, we find clarity as to his character and where we have the best chance at actually at actually getting to know him,
Right.
which makes sense. I mean, if this is how he's revealed himself to us, if this is how he's desired to make himself known, it makes sense that that's where he would be known, you know. But I think the biggest thing for me is if someone comes into my group, they don't know what they believe, but they're exploring and they're trying to understand, then I am humbled and amazed that they would come, like grateful that that they would think to look here, and I would want to help them look however that's best. And that might mean, you know, like there are a lot of great churches in town. It might mean that I recommend them to a different church and say, like, you know, this group I think actually would help you better than we could. Like they've got more resources, or their style fits your vibe better, or but nevertheless, to sit down and read the Bible with somebody.
And again, that sings to the point that putting the individual and their needs before your own, because every person extra in a seat in a church is beneficial to the church, isn't it? And for you, but to be able to actually be, I guess, the root of what a pastor is, and to be a representation of God and to do God's work, that individual's needs are more important than your own.
That's right. And I don't think I would have known to do that, but I was in a church that did that in college, and it just stuck with me. A church that said, like, you're a better fit over there, you should check that out. Not in like you're always welcome here, like we love you, we'd love to have you, but I think you might want to look there because I think it'll be more joy for you.
Right.
And I just thought, well, that is just the most beautiful thing. Like that is, I just read a book. A friend recommended it to me about an American general. It was a biography, and he quoted another general or politician. I don't remember who he quoted, but the quote was that the best leader is not too concerned with being the leader.
Wow.
And I thought, like what that meant, what he meant, and what I mean by it is that if you're too caught in keeping your job, then you stop doing it. You know, if I get so focused on trying to make this church work, because we're a church plant, we're just getting started, we're small. It might be that 5 years from now, we haven't grown enough to be self-sustaining and I'm called somewhere else. And that would be hard for me. I would feel like I'd failed, and I would struggle with did I hear God right in coming here? Did that make sense? You know? But at the same time, if I between now and 5 years from now, make my life focus the church existing and start using people around me to make the church exist the way that I want it to, then I will forego my calling. Like I will have stopped being a pastor in order to have a church.
And you've missed all the stuff between A to Z.
Missed the whole point. Yeah. So yeah, I have to love people and trust that God is going to do what's best for me and my community, whatever that is.
Yeah, seriously. No, I think that's awesome, Drew. And I've luckily put a clock next to my laptop this time. Oh. So I'm actually knowing how long we're running. And I know I need to get towards the 3 points I always like to ask people, because I know me and you could talk like all the rest of the guests I've had on so far for hours.
Yeah, yeah.
And one trio of questions I like to ask everybody is, you know, we've talked a lot about your journey and how you look at certain things in life. And after everything you've learned up to this day, if you could talk to yourself or set yourself where you'd be in 10 years' time, what would that look like for Drew Miller?
Oh gosh, 10 years ago. 10 years ago, so I'm 31. 10 years ago, I was in the either about to be or in the throes of despair and doubt, depression. Like I was in a really dark place 10 years ago.
So 10 years ago, how old do you mind sharing that? I jokingly said.
So I'm 31, so I was 21 then.
So 21 years. So 21 years old, fresh off the boat.
Yeah. So my 21st summer actually was just before the bottom fell out in my faith. It was right before it got really hard. And it was hard. I mean, it was hard to the point that I considered self-harm. Like I was in a bad way. And so man, if I could talk to myself 10 years ago, I mean, just to say you're going to be okay. Like, you're going to get through this. And even being like, you don't even know it's about to hit you. Like, you don't even know how hard it's about to get, but you're going to be okay. And you're going to have beautiful years on the other side, you know, and just
That's
to,
awesome.
And I wouldn't know what I would have no idea what I was talking about. Like, I'm okay right now. Like, yeah, great. That's great. But you really are going to be fine.
I think that's awesome, Drew, because I think something that you've just sprouted to me there is, I think if you said to people, listen, that book right there has every single high and every single low for the rest of your life in it. And you can look at it, you don't have to open it, it's your choice. I think there's some people that would dive into it. I think there's some people that wouldn't dare go near it. But I think what a lot of people have answered that question and made me realize is those rock bottom times have made who they are when I ask the question. You know? Right. And it's those scars that they picked up along those rock bottom times, physically, literally, however, that have kind of been able to answer the question today. And I appreciate you sharing, because that's something that I thought about when on the last podcast. It can be personal when I ask that question. So I thank you for sharing that, you know, because a 21-year-old Drew Miller is probably a different world to the 31-year-old today, I'd imagine.
Smarter, funnier, better looking. He was all those things. You know, even as we talk about it, it occurs to me, I think you're right. I think some of the most profound and meaningful growth that happens in our lives happens in the dark places. And I know some of the most encouraging ministry or care for people that I've been able to do in the past 10 years is because of that dark season. Like, that's enabled me to care for other people in their doubt and in their darkness, and giving me.
You know what, again, not to interrupt you, Drew, but it's just, it goes again to what we talked about before, about being there for others, because when you're in that place of, let's just refer to it as darkness, someone's saying to you, oh, don't worry, this will make you who you're going to, you know, end up to be. It's like, shut up. I don't need to hear that right now.
That's right.
Do you know what I mean? So it's so easy to be like, oh, listen, you know, roses are red, violets are blue. You know, the dark times are gonna, whatever. I don't know the end of the rhyme. But it's easy to just throw that at someone. But when you're actually in that place, it's not easy to be like, I know this is gonna be what doesn't kill you makes you stronger, kind of cliche thing. And that's where I guess, again, it goes back, like we said earlier, leaning on people for you to say, listen, I've been where you've been, because you're never going to be able to, you will physically not be able to speak to 21-year-old Drew Miller, but you may be able to speak to 21-year-old Michael.
Yeah.
And you can say to that, listen, everything's going to work out.
Yeah.
So how about 10 years ahead? 41-year-old. How does that big 40 sound?
Yeah, that's and golly, that's awful. That's awful. 41.
41-year-old Drew.
So what
living in a mansion in North Carolina with a Ferrari, and
that is not the probable path of me. I'm not anywhere near cool enough to have a mansion in North Carolina. That's not my. I'll take a cabin though, if anybody's in the feeling generous. But what would I tell myself?
Or where do you hope to be? Let me word it like that. Where do you hope to be?
I mean, I do hope to be in a church that is visibly successful, you know, that has grown, that's self-sufficient, and that's really deeply engaged in loving their community well. We've got a lot of the starts of that here now, and it could be here, it could be somewhere else. I don't know 10 years from now. But in a really healthy church. I would love to, you know, be married and have a family. That's something we've talked about. It's a desire of mine, but that the Lord hasn't given me yet. And so I would hope to have that. I mean, I think in a lot of ways, I would hope to have all the visible markers of success.
Right.
And so I think the thing that I would need to tell myself is that those don't matter. Like that's probably the one thing that I would need to really, that I hope I still believe in 10 years. So maybe I should tell myself, write down somewhere big and bold so I'll find it then.
Like on those sticky notes.
Yeah, the big church doesn't matter. Like the family doesn't matter. Like they matter in that they're good things and they're beautiful things, but they're not what define me or what give me meaning or what give my life value or joy, ultimate joy. They're all gifts, but not the fundamental gift. That's probably, if I end up where I hope I go, that might be what I need to hear.
Oh, that's awesome. And as a final rounding out question, Drew, if there's a thing or a method or a book or a way that you would recommend to people to get better, what would that be?
I mean, as cliche as it is for the preacher to say it, and I've said it already, it would be look at Jesus. Even if you don't believe in him, even if you don't think that he is anything that the church thinks that he is, even if you don't have any reason to believe that he's God or that he loves you or that he has any effect on your life, even if all those things aren't there, you have to admit that Jesus, a Jewish man from 2,000 years ago, has had an immeasurable effect on the civilization of the world. And his the moral value of life and of beauty and of joy, at least as we understand it in the West, is built almost entirely on him. And so even if you don't believe in the spiritual conclusions of what the church has said about him, he is still, I would say, the primary gateway to what we understand to mean, what we hope to mean when we say things like hope and justice and beauty and love. Like this is the archetype. This is the pinnacle. Even if you don't believe the rest of it. Right. So I would say look at Jesus. That's our best hope for getting better, I would say.
That's awesome, Drew. And I know as a man of faith myself, I can only repeat that 100 times over, because I think an important part that I've realized in my faith is, to not force it on other people.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
But to let them know, like, this is what I do. Because I think it's very easy and it's very prehistoric, I think, in ways to say your way is wrong. If you don't think the way I think, your way is wrong. And I like to, again, challenge that and say, listen, this is the way I think. Take it or leave it.
Yeah. And for me, part of because I do believe in a right and wrong and in a way that is the right way. The problem is I don't actually know where everybody's journey started, and I actually don't know where it's ending either. And so while I believe that Jesus is the source and the conclusion, the beginning and the end of everything, is a whole nother conversation. I have no way to say that the walk that someone else is on, I have no way to know where it's headed.
Right.
And so for me to try to force it into a particular trajectory is foolish. I'm much better off listening, and being with them and offering, like you said, this is what I see. In the hopes that they will also see what I love to be beautiful and lovely. So. Yeah.
And if it applies to them, great. If it doesn't, it's like you said, let them figure it out. Let them make their own scars to sculpt them into who they are, right?
Yeah, their walk.
That's right. Well, listen, Drew, thank you so much for your time on a Sunday. I know the classic of pastor's busiest day of the week may be a Sunday, right?
It very often is. Not for me. These days it's actually pretty chill with coronavirus.
Of course. I mean, as a closing note, how is everything with that?
It's weird. It's just really weird. I mean, we've been doing Zoom group for our like we do like a meeting in the home usually on Thursday nights. We've been doing Zoom for that. We've done some church on Facebook Live on Sunday nights, but recently we've been watching some other services, like other churches together, watching the same service. We can talk about it later. We're not big enough to like put on a big production, so we're enjoying the gifts of the greater church community for now and seeing what the Lord will do.
That's awesome.
Yeah, man.
Well, Drew, thanks again for your time, boss.
Yeah, man. Look for me out on the pitch.
I appreciate that. All right, boss. Thanks again.
Field.
No, we call it pitch.
Oh, it is a pitch.
Yeah, we call it a pitch.
Right. I started thinking that was rugby, and I got nervous.
No, you got it right.
Excellent. I'll see you then.
See you then, boss. Thank you.
Yeah, man. See you, brother.